You're listening to Nightlight Radio Network. This is Dr. Bob Hieronimus, co-host of 21st Century Radio. We are happy to present this rebroadcast of our show on Nightlight.
This is Billy Cox with the Band of the Gypsies and the Jimi Hendrix Experience. You're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
You know, we've done many books on Bob Dylan because he assisted me and 5 billion others. 5 billion other planetary souls to get through some very hard times. Yet, just a year or so ago, while attending a Willie Nelson concert with Bob Dylan was going to follow him, I was so bored with his attitude that I and my friends decided to just walk out. And frankly, we felt damn good about it because going to the shows 10, 20, 30 years ago is so much different than it is now. You know, I was thrilled, however, to learn of the book Bob Dylan, New York by June Skinner Sawyers, and here's what the blurb on the book's back cover that persuaded me to really enjoy it. Quote, "This is the only book devoted to untangling the relationship between New York and Dylan. It explores his public and private lives in the city, captures the spirit of a changing time, and features more than 50 sites where he lived, worked, and played. Street maps let the reader navigate from Cafe Wha to the Chelsea Hotel, from Columbia's Studio A to his apartment on 4th Street, now good old positively 4th Street, and to all other landmarks in Dylan's New York Odyssey. June Skinner Sawyers has written or edited more than 20 books on subjects such as we used to call it when we were there, Greenwich Village. Yes, Greenwich Village, Springsteen, and the Beatles, the Beatles. We used to call them the Beagles. She is a columnist for the Chicago Tribune. Welcome to 21st Century Radio, June.
Thank you very much.
June, who was Woody Guthrie in the heart and mind of Bob Dylan?
Oh, Woody Guthrie was his mentor. Once he heard Woody Guthrie, his whole life changed. He became enamored. He became Woody Guthrie up to a point until he became somebody else. And that somebody else was Bob Dylan. That is, Robert Zimmerman became eventually Bob Dylan. But in between, there was Woody Guthrie.
Mm-hmm. Now, who was Bob Dylan in the mind and heart of Woody Guthrie?
Well, interesting question. Guthrie and Dylan did meet when Guthrie was very sickly, and Guthrie was impressed with how much Dylan knew about his music, knew about Guthrie's music, and so up until the day that they met, Guthrie didn't know who he was, but when they finally did meet face to face, he was impressed with this rather strange young man who came from Minnesota.
But before that meeting, was it Arthur Arlo Guthrie that met with Dylan? And
Yes. Dylan went to try to find Guthrie's house in Brooklyn, mm-hmm. Near Coney Island, and he ended up knocking on the door, and a very young Arlo Guthrie was there, and Guthrie was impressed not with more with what Dylan was wearing. I think he was the boots he was wearing or something. He thought he was a rather strange figure who wanted to know everything about his father.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. There's so many things I enjoyed about this book. I mean, I know you probably were not too happy with my introduction and walking out on Dylan's concert.
Oh, not at all, because I don't blame you. He's the anti-showman. He's the anti-Springsteen. He has his back to the audience most of the time.
Yeah, I got tired of that.
I understand. I mean, I didn't see him years ago. I just saw him only 4 times in the last maybe half a dozen years, maybe 8 years. So I didn't see Dylan during his heyday. So I don't know what he was like if you saw him years ago.
Well, I think being an artist, all group of us artists watching him, I mean, we're looking at God, looking at we
Yes.
were looking at this fellow up there, and we
Right.
felt just as unsure of ourselves, I guess, as he did when he first, because a number of us sang in the village.
Right.
Back in, I mean, it didn't take anything to sing in the village. All you had to do was have a guitar, and we used to go to a number of places. A lot of people did. This is not just something I did.
Right.
But for a couple of beers,
Right.
you'd go in. And I remember one time I was singing one of Bob Dylan's songs, and it was a 20-minute song. I just made it all up, and it was thrilling. I didn't know what I said afterwards. But it brought down the house. They offered me free beers for the rest of the night.
There you go.
And that was enough because you're not going to get paid much. Or at least we weren't. But Dylan didn't make out bad there economically in the beginning, though. Not too bad.
Well, of course, it was much cheaper then. And what did he pay per month in his apartment on 4th Street? Like $60 or whatever it was a month? I mean, things have changed since then.
You think it's more than $60 a month now, huh?
Right.
Yeah, well, mine was $50, and it was...
Yeah, see?
But, yeah, but you had to deal with all the rats and all the other stuff. Now...
Oh, well, it comes with the territory.
It sure does. Rats and roaches. That's what we used to call R&R. When everyone was referring to R&R as something else, or rock and roll, or this rest and relaxation, we were talking about rats and roaches. Because
is that right?
It was the inevitable...
That was more accurate, I guess, eh?
Yeah, sure, because we all learned the magic was when you go up to your apartment and you turn on the light, do not go in. Don't go in right away, and do not open your eyes. Because if you did, you would see this brown wall move.
Oh, my God.
And, of course, it would turn into a pale white or something like that. But the rule was, don't do it. Just...
Not very glamorous.
Oh, being an artist is always glamorous. You know that. Now, what was New York like in the early 60s? And we'll answer that one first, and then we'll get into what attracted Dylan to it.
Well, New York, at the time that he left Minnesota, was, of course, much cheaper and much safer, although it's safe now again. But for a big chunk of time, and especially in the late 70s and 80s, it was not very safe. But when he went there, it was just coming out of the 50s era. And so, especially going down to the village, everything was wide open, and you can do whatever you want. And you can. I mean, he went to Cafe Wha the day he arrived. He was playing in the coffee houses the day he arrived. And can you imagine anything like that happening today? Not so much.
I don't think so. No.
Mm-hmm. It's a completely different era, completely different atmosphere. And he was really in the right place for him at the right time.
What attracted him to it was a big thing for him to come here from where he was coming from.
Well, yes and no, but he deliberately chose New York because New York was his point of reference. Everything that he knew about the world growing up in Minnesota, of interest anyway, everything came out of New York. He had to go to New York. To him, it was the capital of the world. Yeah. It was the right place for him to be at that right time.
Was he reading the Beats then?
Oh yeah, he was reading about the Beats in Dinkytown, as the neighborhood was called, and is called in Minneapolis, by the university where he attended. Well, sort of attended, not really attended, but he was officially a student at the University of Minnesota at Minneapolis. He was into the Beats, he was into Guthrie, he was into folk music, acoustic music. He had gone away from rock and roll because rock and roll has become bland by the late 50s, early 60s. Elvis went to the army and all of that. So he had turned his attention to authentic music, which he meant it to be folk music, Guthrie. And but he was listening to that and reading the Beats, and his mind is like a sponge, just learning and endless curiosity.
Well, as you said, he headed for Cafe Wha and started his New York City career. What part did Cafe Wha and Cafe Bazaar and Mills House or Tavern
all
play?
of those are part of it, but especially the Gaslight. That's where he had a residency there for a time, and that's when Live the Gaslight was put out, not just a few years ago, but that was in October 1962. when he had his residency there, and that led to bigger venues. I mean, you have to remember that within a short period of time, he had outgrown the coffee houses of the village, and had moved further uptown to the town hall, to Carnegie Hall, to Philharmonic. This is all happening within a matter of years, just a few years.
That was extraordinary.
Yeah, it's remarkable how fast he grew out of the Greenwich Village coffee house scene.
Well, let me say one thing. It's a number of things are remarkable about this book, and that deals with the maps, and the numbers. It's wonderful to be able to see. It's from 1 to 50 or so.
Yeah.
And to be able to pinpoint exactly where they are, and any of us who's spent some time up there in the village, I mean, my head can walk through these streets.
Yeah, the good thing is that many of them many are gone, of course, but many of the buildings are still there. Not all, but quite a few of the buildings were still there. And I had the good fortune of being at what is now the 116 MacDougal, with the former Gaslight, which is reopened. It reopened after the book came out, just in May of this year. In
celebration of your book.
Yeah.
Just in time. Good going.
Yeah. So the village, of course, has changed a lot. But some of the coffee houses, like Cafe Reggio, is still there, and Cafe Dante is still there. All around the MacDougal and Bleecker Street area. So even though, of course, the rents have certainly changed, increased, but many of the buildings are still there. So if you do choose to go to New York and walk around the village and elsewhere in Manhattan, you will certainly see sites associated with Dylan, and that's the fun thing about the book.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of fun things about the book.
Yeah, okay, well, right.
You write damn well.
Yeah.
You feel like when you start reading it, you don't want to put it down. And I got very upset when I came to the ending of the book. You needed to have another 100 pages here, dear.
I know, but this is part of a series, the Music and Play series that the publisher, which is a small indie house based in Berkeley, has put together. So it's just meant to be an introduction to a musician and the city that he or she was affected by and influenced by.
Well, still would have liked to have had another 100 pages, no matter what you say.
Oh, maybe the next edition then.
Good. Maybe you'll have part 1 and part 2.
There you go. That's a good idea.
That's right. Now, well, what were Dylan? We touched a little on Woody Guthrie there, but what were Dylan's first meetings with Woody Guthrie like?
Right. Well, he went to visit Guthrie at the hospital in New Jersey, where he was ill, and they shared songs. He sang him songs. Dylan sang Guthrie songs, or songs that Guthrie either wrote or sang to Guthrie. So that's the remarkable thing too, to me, how they got along so well. And then it's a short period of time, and here is this very young, barely out of his teens, really, young man who's visiting this icon, this American icon. And it's remarkable how they were able to talk to each other and communicate to each other through not just words, but through song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, right now, we need to stop communicating to take a break.
All right.
And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Washington Square Park, where folk singing got its start in the 40s. That was before I went up there. And in the summer of 61, where Dylan met Suze Rotolo, and I think she just passed on last
she did.
February.
February of this year?
Yeah, February 25th.
Yeah.
We got a number of other things to talk about, especially Positively 4th Street. I think that was our national anthem because it seemed like everywhere we were going, we were in that.
Right.
We were inside. He was singing songs that were part of our lives, and he didn't even know it.
Right. Yeah, that's the magic of Dylan. That's right.
That's right. Well, our guest is June Skinner Sawyers. Bob Dylan, New York, part of the Music Place series, the Roaring 40s Press. Order it from the link on 21stcenturyradio.com.
Hi, This is Steve Boone, bass player of the Class of 2000, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, the Lovin' Spoonful. And you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob.
Our guest is June Skinner Sawyers, Bob Dylan, New York, part of the Music Place series, the Roaring 40s Press. All right, geez, whiz. June, this time's going so fast, I better shut up. Now, Washington Square Park, where folksing got its start in the Village in the 40s. A lot of 40s going on here.
That's when it started.
Was it of any importance to Dylan's New York experience?
Oh, sure. I mean, he was part of that. Maybe not. Maybe he doesn't get the press. The other singers, like Pete Seeger, is probably associated more with Washington Square Park than Dylan was. But he certainly was there. He was especially when he first arrived in New York. He would have hung out there and played guitar there, like so many other musicians in the city at that time. So it was certainly part of his informal musical education, definitely.
Well, in the summer of '61, Dylan met Suze Rotolo. Where and under what circumstances?
Well, she remembered meeting him. It was late July '61. He was performing as part of Dylan was performing as part of a marathon folk concert at a beautiful church, which is still there on the Upper West Side, called Riverside Church. And she thought he was rather curious and entertaining, and I think she described him as funny, engaging, and persistent.
Oh, he was persistent.
Quote unquote.
I can see him doing that, yeah.
Yeah, so she was impressed by his intensity, and they just hit it off, and she was so influential, again, in his unofficial education.
She sure was, wasn't she?
Yeah, which introduced him to all kinds of influences, theater, the art world, just a lot of ideas that he'd never really thought about until she brought it to his attention.
Oh, yes, he... when she died of lung cancer on February 25th, did Dylan respond in any way to her passing?
Not that I know of. But then again, he didn't even attend, as far as I know, when Mary Travers died. I didn't hear any reaction from him.
Yeah.
He wasn't at her funeral like many other people were associated with the Village at that time. At least it wasn't reported that he was there. So maybe he did something privately.
I hope he did, because he owed her a lot. This is one of the problem with men who generally are kind of like idiots about this. They really don't give enough credit to the people that have helped them move along, especially when they're women.
Right.
And that is really tragic, because that's the biggest problem in our culture today, unfortunately. But we can't touch about that. That's against rules and regulations 506 of the Penal Code. However, Positively 4th Street is one of my favorite songs by Dylan. Tell us about his days at 161 West 4th Street and its effect on his work.
Well, I know most people believe that the song is about 4th Street in the Village. Now, there are others who question that, and they think it may be about 4th Street in Dinkytown, in Minneapolis. So,
hey, I can see the parallel there.
Yeah. I mean, who knows for sure?
Yeah.
But whether it's 4th Street in Dinkytown or 4th Street in the Village, it was certainly, he was living there for like $60 or so a month. It was part of his education and being in New York, and just being so close to the action. When he lived on 4th Street, he can just walk. He can just walk everywhere to the coffee houses, to the theaters, to the pubs, to the White Horse Tavern, for example. Everything was within walking distance, and I can't emphasize enough the importance of that to his career and to his creativity. He was surrounded by so much artistic life.
Well, that's why I thought it was the 4th Street in New York City and not elsewhere. But what the hell do I know, right? I never talked to him, so I don't know. And I don't even know if he'd tell me anyway.
Yeah.
Well, now, time's running out. What was Dylan's experience with the Ed Sullivan Show? This was really something.
Oh, well, he he was supposed to be on there, but the executives had a problem with a John Birch song because they thought it was controversial. It referred to communism, again, a different era. But so they asked that they demanded that he not sing the song. So that really upset him. They asked that he sing a Clancy song, the Clancy Brothers song, as a replacement. Now, he was a big fan of the Clancy Brothers, but he did not want to sing a Clancy Brothers song. He wanted to sing the song that he had intended to sing.
Yeah.
But they said no, so he walks off during rehearsal, and he never appeared in the Ed Sullivan Show for that reason.
Boy, he's got some guts there.
Yep.
Dylan had become unwittingly the voice of a generation. Why was he uncomfortable with that label?
Oh, he hated it. That wasn't his intent.
Oh.
He didn't want to be a spokesman for anybody, never mind a generation.
Yeah.
He just wanted to sing his songs and do his thing and not have to represent the entire, all the young people of the world. That was not what he wanted to do with his music.
Well, I still don't think he treated Joan Baez with the proper respect, but that's
my bias.
My
funny thing
bias.
is, well, I mean, when the Baez documentary aired not too long ago, apparently they have still been in touch.
Good God.
And he still referred to her very endearingly as Joni. So I thought that was sort of a nice touch.
Well, I'm glad he did. Maybe he's growing up at this particular time.
Maybe. Well, he's 7 years old, so maybe, yeah.
Yeah, geniuses make mistakes just like everybody else.
Right.
And
he was a young guy at the time. So
yeah, he was a young guy, and the next incarnation, he'll probably come back as a woman and then see what that feels like.
You never know.
Yeah, I think so.
He has so many personas, right? So
yeah.
You never know what he's going to come up with next.
Well, thank you, June. I really enjoyed this work. It needed to be longer. Try to get them to do part 2 because I know you write so well that you make us feel like we're there during that time.
Oh, great. Nice to hear that. Thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome. June Skinner Sawyers, Bob Dylan, New York, part of the Music Place series, Roaring 40s Press. Order it from the link on 21stCenturyRadio.com. 21st Century Radio is produced by Hieronimus Company, and our executive producer and research assistant is Laura Kortner. I'm Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and remember to get a haircut.